So the Euthyphro dilemma comes from Plato, and it is a dialogue of Socrates. So here's what the Euthyphro dilemma is about. And I have here a picture of a bull, right, with two horns. So we're talking about the horns of a dilemma. How can you be stuck on the horns of a dilemma? And here's the question that is asked. On the one hand, we might say that whatever God calls good is good because God says so. After all, God is God, and if God says something is good, it's good. On the other hand, though, we might say God only calls good that which is truly good. After all, God isn't going to call something good if it's evil. God wouldn't say, we presume, that murder is good. But if we think about it this way, we're really stuck. Because on the one hand, we might say the good is arbitrary. Nothing is really good or bad. Whatever God calls good is good. If God does decide to call murder good, then murder would be good. Now, this sounds a little bit crazy, but there actually were some theologians throughout history who kind of came to this conclusion, who said, well, if God were to actually do that, then I guess we would have to obey that and it would be good. And an example that those theologians provided was the example of Abraham being commanded to sacrifice Isaac. Well, we might push back against that, and we might say, well, no, but God wouldn't actually call something good unless it was indeed truly good. But if we say that, we're stuck with saying, but that means there is something called good, which even God is bound to. And if God is bound to it, it's a principle that's higher than God. And if there's a principle that's higher than God, then God is not really God. So the dilemma is, on the one hand, we might say, well, what we say is good is just arbitrary. There's really no such thing as good. Ultimately, there really is no good and evil. There's just whatever this super powerful being says. Now, on the other hand, we can say, well, there really is an absolute idea of the good, but that is really God, and God isn't God. Well, how do we get through that dilemma? I mean, if we want to think about theological ethics, and we are thinking from the perspective of a Christian theology which begins with the affirmation of God. I believe in God the Father, Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. That's really the fundamental affirmation we're making in Christian theology. But if we're making that, what does that say for ethics? How can we respond to the Euthyphro dilemma? Now, there are some responses and there are some ways of working through it, so don't despair, but think about it a bit, and when we meet together in class, we're going to talk about some ways we think we might respond to this.